HR and learning and development, project management and agile scrum, ISO and quality management, information security. Each GSDC certification is designed to empower professionals with confidence and help organizations stay competitive in a fast-changing landscape. Every certification is crafted with insights from 100-plus global advisory board members representing top universities and leading industry experts. Our certified professionals are trusted by 500-plus multinational companies, which help unlock better roles, faster promotions, and delivering cutting-edge expertise. We partner with 100-plus authorized training partners and 50-plus universities, supporting talent across all career levels, from entry-level to executive leadership. As a GSDC member, you gain lifelong access to interactive webinars, hands-on workshops, SME panels, and global summits. Join a vibrant community of 25,000-plus members and be part of our global events. Check our reviews on Trustpilot. We're trusted worldwide for quality, support, and impact. Whether you're aiming higher or building tomorrow's talent, GSDC is your partner in purposeful growth and impactful leadership. Visit our website to explore our offerings. GSDC, share the best practices and learn from the best practices. Welcome to the Global Skill Development Council, your gateway to digital transformation. We are an independent, vendor-neutral ISO IEC 1024 accredited certification body committed to helping individuals and organizations stay future-ready in a rapidly evolving world. GSDC is accredited by the Accreditation Board for International Certification Bodies, ABICB. For 10 years, we've certified more than 100,000 professionals across Europe, North America, Asia, and Africa, with our offices in Switzerland, the United States, and Singapore. Our programs are recognized by leading publications and podcasts, including Forbes, Tech Target, People Managing People. We offer 100-plus globally accredited certifications across emerging and in-demand domains like generative AI and emerging technologies, HR and learning and development, project management and agile scrum, ISO and quality management, information security.
Hello everyone, my name is Pratibha and I'll be your moderator today. So once again, a very warm welcome back to all of you in one more impactful session of Learning and Development webinar. So if you have any query regarding the GSDC or if you have any query regarding the session, please feel free to use the chat box. So let's start with today's session. Just allow me a minute to share my screen. Meanwhile, please do let us know from where you guys are watching. We would be happy to know that. So on behalf of the Global Skill Development Council, I'm truly delighted to welcome you all into the GSDC Certified Learning, GSDC Next, the future of learning, talent, and leadership in a skill-driven world, building future-ready organizations through skills, agile talent, and next-gen leadership with GSDC. And one of the things which make this webinar so interesting is the amazing expert panel we have lined up for you. So before starting the session, let me give you a quick introduction who we are. Global Skill Development Council is a globally recognized certification body. We are accredited by ABICB. Till yet, we have a 250,000 professional certified with us. We are partnered with 100 plus training providers across globe. We are also associated with 1,000 plus multinational companies and 50 plus universities worldwide. We have a 500 plus subject matter expert across world who help us developing our program. So these are the training partners who are connected with us from the Asia, Africa, Canada, Australia, Nigeria, Singapore, and many other regions. So special thanks to all training partners to be associated with us. And a very special thank you to our media partner, WordPress Hub, for covering all of our press releases and event releases. So before starting the session, I just wanted to make a quick announcement regarding GSDC AI Studio, Lifelong Learning Initiative. In the GSDC AI Studio, you're going to get 100 plus live monthly sessions with global experts, including 4 daily sessions, 45-minute live expert lead session for hands-on learning, sessions from global experts. You can learn directly from our AI leaders around the world, real-time practice, you can apply concept immediately and get your question answered. Certification ready. You will be getting the training aligned with industry standard for job ready skills. So currently we are covering 100 plus certifications in our portfolio, including learning and development, HR, GenAI, agentic AI, emerging technologies, ISO lead auditor and implementer, project management and PMO, Agile DevOps and SRE, cybersecurity, digital transformation, and many more. But once you get certified with GSDC, you just don't walk away with the certification. You also become a part of our community, which comes with GSDC membership benefit, including lifelong membership, certification upgrade, workshop, boot camps, learning club access, also the full benefit of GSDC AI Studio, and many more. With that, it's time to introduce our today's speaker. So today we are going to have session with Stephen, and due to health emergency, Stephen could not be available today for the session, but he has sent a recording which he recorded in advance just in case if this kind of situation is coming up. So we are going to play the record. We are going to play his recording for today's session. But if you have any query, you can use the chat box and we'll be taking those questions to our speaker and we'll be answering all of the questions through our LinkedIn post and our social media blog. But before starting the recording, let me give you a short introduction of Stephen. So Stephen is a seasoned software testing and quality assurance leader known as the Stoic Tester. He currently serves as principal consultant at Inspires Testing, helping organizations improve QA practice and L&D practice, also the test strategies. With nearly 2 decades of experience across industries, Stephen blends practical testing skills with Stoic philosophy to drive impactful results. He is an engaging speaker, QA advocate, and active contributor to the global testing community. Stephen holds industry recognized certification and champions continuous learning and professional growth. And let me start with the recording. But before starting the recording, just a quick reminder, if you have any query regarding the GSTC or if you would like to connect with Stephen regarding any query, any guidance, please feel free to use the chat box and we'll be taking those questions to our speaker and all of the questions will be answered by our social media and LinkedIn post. So just allow me a minute to share my screen. And also, if you'll not be able to hear the recording voice or if visual will not be clear, please feel free to use the chat box to let me know. So here we go. So I hope you're all able to see the visuals clear and please do let me know if you'll not be able to hear my voice.
So first off, a little bit about me. Preston did a wonderful introduction for me, but I'll maybe go into some little bit of a background. So I'm ex-UK Armed Forces. I spent 13, 14 years as an aircraft engineer working on fast jets. And emotional intelligence, I guess, was first introduced to me as a concept during that period of my career in life. Leadership and management was taught to a great extent within the armed forces how to be a leader of people and leader of teams, and understanding emotional intelligence and how that factors in was a great byproduct of that, and something I certainly carried with me for the rest of my career as I moved to different roles throughout my life. But that's where I kind of was first introduced to the broad concept. It used heavily by the armed forces around behavioural. Understanding people's behaviors, understanding the type of leadership style that you have was a kind of big introduction of where that emotional intelligence came from. So I kept on with that throughout my life. After I left the armed forces, I worked for
Participant, please give me a thumbs up or let me know into the chat if you're able to hear the voice clearly and the visuals are also clear. Thank you so much.
A number of companies in the UK, predominantly as a software tester, also as an engineer in a mix of backgrounds. Predominantly testing, but also done a fair amount of engineering. I've led teams of engineers, teams of people, and been led by some amazing people as well, and managed by some amazing people. So some of this practical advice that I'm hopefully going to be giving you is not just based upon stuff that I've researched and understand and stuff that I've done myself, but also some things I've found from other people that I've found inspiring in terms of how they approach matters with individuals and groups, and some really high quality managers and leaders that I've worked with under my time. Hopefully that's enough about me in terms of rambling around. If you want to find more about me, there's some links to my social media and whatnot at the end of the presentation. But the next thing I just wanted to quickly do is what I'd like people to do, is a bit of audience interaction, is maybe just give a bit of a check-in with yourself. So what I would like people to do is just, how are you feeling emotionally right now? So now that might be a very weird question to ask a group of strangers. I'm not necessarily asking to put all the answers in chat, but what I'm trying to portray and get across is that people often aren't conscious of the emotional state that they're actually in. They're kind of experiencing it almost from an outsider's perspective and allow that emotional state to carry them or move them in a way that they're not expecting or not understanding. So what I'd like people to do is maybe just have a quick check-in with themselves. How are you feeling emotionally right now? Are you calm? Are you a little bit anxious? Are you excited? All those things, and just try and draw your own awareness into that emotional state and how that might affect you, and how this talk might affect you. There's nothing upsetting of that nature in this presentation, so hopefully it's something enjoyable for everybody. But it's just something that, as a practice, and it's a practical tip, is just from time to time throughout the day, just do a little check-in with yourself. How are you feeling emotionally? And not just at surface level, maybe a little bit deeper. Is anything troubling you? Anything worrying you? I think it's a really important thing to do in terms of your own welfare and understanding. We'll come back towards that at the back end to see if anyone's improved their mood towards the next part. Okay, so a rough agenda that we're going to work through today. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction into the topic of emotional intelligence. I'll put it into the context of the other types of intelligence around. So if people aren't aware, there's different forms of intelligence. We all have strengths and weaknesses in those different elements, and where emotional intelligence fits into that spectrum. The foundations of what emotional intelligence is. So we'll touch on things like empathy and emotional awareness. We're going to do a little emotional intelligence assessment and some self-awareness with each other, and walk through some practical exercises. I'm going to give you some tips on self-regulation, and this falls back into my Stoic practices, how to regulate myself emotionally. And we're going to look at how we can build that empathy with people. Empathy is a muscle, something you can train and develop over time, something you can refine. And empathy is the cornerstone and foundation of deep, meaningful connections with the human beings, be that your workforce, your friends and family, etc. We'll look at how you can utilize your social skills and influence to encourage those practices that we spoke about earlier. I'm going to give you some real-world use cases. Some are directly from myself, some are from people that I've worked for and worked with, including a bit of some case studies. And then there's going to be a little bit of an action plan and some resource material provided at the end, which I can give you as links to things you might want to research and look at afterwards to kind of continue with this journey if you're completely unaware of AI. And hopefully, if you are aware of it, this is maybe just a nice refresher for people that have a better understanding and grounding of that. I hope you enjoy the rest of this presentation. So, a bit of an introduction. We're going to explore coaching, and what I mean by coaching, I don't mean sports coaching. I mean coaching of, and I want to separate coaching from leadership and coaching from management. Right? You can coach a junior, senior, etc. Coaching about is sharing deep conversations with each other to a mutual level of trust. So that could normally be coaching somebody up and getting someone into a more senior position, but it also works peer to peer and everything else. And that's built in within emotional intelligence. Without emotional intelligence, you can't really build that coaching relationship. It'll become very transactional and very inorganic. It won't really function particularly well. I've got a number of objectives that I'm hopefully going to try and cover off during this presentation. We'll see how many of these we can tick through. So I'm going to try and define the core of emotional intelligence, what it is, right, its root essence, and again how it relates to coaching. Talked a little bit about that in the introduction, but hopefully a bit more. Understand the various different types of intelligence and understand why in emotional intelligence this is quite unique in the other intelligences that we're going to talk about. I don't know if that's a plural of intelligences, but I'm going to go with it. We're going to apply some emotional intelligence strategies, so how we can deepen some of those relationships. So I'm talking like coach to client or coach to coach to peer, and what those would look like. There's some real-time assessment methods we're going to go through. and hopefully help everybody understand how to use them yourself. There's some interactive exercises that I've mentioned towards the end on how we can strengthen our own self-awareness and our own self-regulation. Emotional intelligence, I might want to start with that maybe. Emotional intelligence is something that you really need to cultivate for yourself first and then kind of build up and outwards. If you are unregulated and unaware of your own emotional state, it's very difficult to build that with other people, right? So it's got to start from within and work your way outwards. And the last thing we're going to try and look at maybe like an action plan and how you can embed some of the things that I'm talking about, some of the literature that I might be sharing into your work practices, home life, hobby, etc. So let's start off with Gardner's multiple intelligence model. So for those that aren't aware, there's multiple different forms of intelligence. Even though there is a generalized IQ test that you can undertake, there are actually multiple different forms of intelligence, and each individual, for a combination of genetics, culture, background, and education, has different strengths and weaknesses. Within those different types of intelligence, some have natural affinity towards it, some have developed that over time. And I'm going to go through these now and we'll highlight where I think emotional intelligence sits within these different intelligence models. And I'd also caveat with this, there's other intelligence models available. Gardner's is just the one that I'm aware of and I've understood and used before. There are other intelligence models around. So the first thing would be something like linguistic intelligence. I've kind of summarize that as to be word smart. What do I mean by that is people that have a natural affinity to languages or the written word. Good examples I found of this in my forces career. There was multiple people I worked with who were multiple bilingual or trilingual. They were completely fluent in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different languages. They were interpreters. It's something that naturally came to them over time, and they found it very easy to learn another language and learn another way of speaking. Also, word smart is kind of also in my head the ability to consume the written word in various forms of formats. So maybe where this comes in for me as an individual would be I can read pretty quickly. So speed reading is something I've kind of developed over time and something that I think I'm pretty strong at. I can read a large body of text in quite short order and get most of the information there at kind of 80%. And again, what I would say with all these types of intelligence, these are things that you can practically improve to some degree. There is a genetic limit, like I've said to some people, but generally speaking, you can potentially improve some of these and address areas that might have raised concern. Logical intelligence, so this is more like numbering, number or reasoning, logical intelligence, for want of a better description. So your ability to understand mathematics, understand scientific principles. I've worked with people who are naturally have an affinity towards code, have a natural affinity towards high-level mathematics, without really having to try to learn to understand it. Me personally, something I generally struggle with a great deal, something I've had to understand and had to work on. I think my reasoning intelligence is quite good, so my logical brain is quite good, but mathematics, numbers, data crunching, not something that necessarily comes to me very easily. And again, this is a combination of genetic factors, educational factors, cultural background, etc. There's a whole suite of things here. But again, logical intelligence is another type of intelligence within the spectrum. Spatial intelligence, I guess we'd call that picture smart. So it's the ability to understand and discern detail from an image or a visual construct. So how I've seen this, if I go back to my armed forces background, there were people who I've met who were intelligence analysts who review footage or pictures of an image and could almost instantaneously recognize extreme details and extreme points of reference that a normal untrained eye just wouldn't be able to pick up. If you also think about artists and people who have natural affinity towards artistic revenues, if you think of artists like Da Vinci, etc., an enormous amount of spatial intelligence around their ability to construct colours, understand the palette, how to construct an image, how to redraw a face, etc. I'm going to try and pronounce this next one, so please bear with me. My northern accent may not come across particularly well here, but bodily kinesthetic intelligence, or how I'd like to call it, is just body smart. So this is around your ability to understand your own body, your intelligence around that. So we're talking about things like hand-eye coordination, balance. People who are naturally gifted at sports, I think everyone has probably met somebody like that. Again, plenty of people I know who were amazing at every sport they've ever tried without really having to try. People who can learn skiing within a couple of hours, those kinds of things. So it's understanding how your body functions, your hand-eye coordination, things like that. That's what kind of goes into body smart. Musical intelligence kind of also goes into like an auditory intelligence as well. So it's the ability to understand and interpret auditory stimulus. So in this case, music, but also in terms of other sights and sounds. So if you think about people that are naturally good at audio editing, people that are musicians, they have a natural affinity. They can discern the key of a certain key on a guitar string. They can hear that noise and instantly recognize a note that's being performed. And again, a really good extreme example of that was someone like Mozart, who could write great, enormous performances overnight, and it's immediately to appear in his brain. Music intelligence. So the two blue ones I've highlighted here are where it ties into emotional intelligence, which is, remember, the thing we're kind of trying to get across in this presentation. So this is interpersonal intelligence and intrapersonal intelligence. So being people smart and self smart is how I would distinguish those two things. So how good are you at discerning what other people are like, not just necessarily emotionally, but generally. And then how intelligent are you at understanding yourself? And this is a big one because your ego tends to get in the way. We are kind of, as human beings, quite critical of assessing ourselves on our own self-state. So, but those two things are enormously linked together. For you to be people smart, as in you have to understand people, you really have to understand yourself. You need to understand where your own drives and wants and needs and emotions are coming from to build a perspective of why you come to that conclusion. That really helps you understand someone else's perspective and meet that common ground. So those two are intrinsically linked, and I've highlighted those as why I think they're the most applicable to emotional intelligence in the nature of what we're talking about right now. And the last one would be naturalistic intelligence, one I'm probably the least familiar with and one I had to do a bit of research on. So I would just classify this as nature smart, so knowledge of the natural environment, a general understanding of how things are in the natural world. So the examples I've got for this one, I did some research on it, is people who are naturally very good in an outdoor setting, people who can have a natural affinity for hiking, a natural affinity for camping outdoors, people that can do yachts and all these kinds of things, and naturally outdoor environment in nature, in the thick of it. It's just something they can do almost instinctively without really kind of think about it. As I mentioned before, there are other models available. It's just the model I've used for this example, and where I've tried to tie it into emotional intelligence. So just to reinforce that fact, it sits within your intrapersonal and interpersonal intelligence, or your skill sets. That's where emotional intelligence really sits. Okay, so enough about the types of intelligence. Let's really try and focus on what emotional intelligence is, and why emotional intelligence is important as an individual, as a coach, as a mentor, or whatever role you have in life. Why is it important? Well, we are emotional animals as much as we are logically driven animals. So our emotions tend to shape our decision making and our learning processes. Even someone who is unemotional on the surface is potentially feeling an enormous amount of emotion internally, not expressing it. So they do certainly, it does certainly impact the way that you respond to events, the way that you respond to your upbringing, the learning, the work that you have, the job that you're doing. It's all impacted by the emotions that you're expressing and feeling, both internally and externally. And the four kind of pillar stones, or the four core foundations of emotional intelligence are listed on the presentation slide. You can see there. So the first one is empathy. So this is effective. I'm hoping I don't have to explain this to everybody, but empathy is the ability to feel compassion for another living thing, not necessarily just another human being. Could be an animal, it could be a cause, as an example. So empathy for life is kind of what I would describe that for. Compassion and love for others is where I think empathy would sit, and empathizing with someone's situation. So someone's had a loss or a bereavement in the family, you empathize with that person's loss. You may have experienced something similar yourself. You know how horrible that experience was, so where your empathy would come in enormously. Next one, self-awareness. If you remember from the previous one, we had intrapersonal knowledge of self. So self-awareness, which is when I did the quality check-in with you guys a minute ago, guys and girls a minute ago, which is how are you feeling right now? What is your emotional state right now? You might have never thought about that consciously and actually decided to decide what your emotional state is and kind of look inwards and think about it in that terms. So self-awareness is hugely important. A lot of the things that we have as challenges in the workplace in the modern world is due to a lack of self-awareness in our own emotional state, and not knowing that we're angry, not knowing that we're upset, not knowing that we're happy, etc. The next one would be self-regulation. So self-awareness and self-regulation are tied very closely together, and again, this is where my Stoic principles come in greatly for me, and why this is one of the more passionate elements of it for me. So self-awareness, if self-awareness is knowing that I'm angry, if you think about it in that simplistic term, self-awareness is I'm angry right now. Self-regulation is, well, I know I'm angry, but what am I going to do about that anger? Am I going to express it? Am I going to scream and shout? Am I going to get annoyed? Am I going to throw something or whatever? Or I'm going to understand that I'm angry for a reason, and I'm going to choose to not act on that anger. I want to choose to remain calm and controlled, pleasant and agreeable and amicable with the individuals or individual around me. So self-regulation, I guess you could think about it as self-control, is I know my emotional state, and then what do I choose to do about that emotional state? So this is where emotional intelligence comes. Don't want to say a spectrum, but it can become a real challenge for people. Some people are naturally very emotional. Emotions are a deep-seated way in which they live, and their emotions are very raw and at the surface. So they really struggle with that self-regulation element of it, but their awareness of their emotional state is very heightened. So despite these four foundations all being shown here as equal shapes and size, they're all definitely varied depending on the individuals that we're talking about, and how that shape might change over time. So you might start with very little self-awareness, but it's something you can work on over time, and it starts to expand something as more of a strong suit for you. Excuse me while I take a drink. And then the last foundation, which we'll talk about, is social skills. So how to conduct yourself in a social setting. This could be work as well as kind of also a pleasure environment outside of work. So this is, how do you have a conversation? How do you meet and greet people? How does your body language react around people? Something again that is massively important to develop. As you may know, that when you communicate with somebody else, the words that you use and the sound that you make is only part of that conversation, is only part of how we speak to each other. Your body language, your facial expressions is an enormous part of how we communicate with each other in peer-to-peer or peer-to groups. So as an example, in this presentation, if I did the rest of my presentation with my hands covered over my eyes, you would think that would be a bit strange, and you probably wouldn't pay much attention to the presentation. So I'm trying to use my facial expressions and try to smile to show across that I'm trying to enjoy the subject and get it across, which I do. So again, knowing the social skills, how to spot them within other people as well, not just to necessarily use them yourself, is another really core pillar of emotional intelligence. So I'm hoping that portrays the core foundations of emotional intelligence. For the rest of the presentation, I think I refer to it as EI. So if you see that acronym displayed anywhere in this presentation, I'm just referring to emotional intelligence. Okay. So this next thing, I'm going to walk you through a really simple 4-step self-assessment. So if you remember, I said earlier in the first few slides, I asked people to maybe do a self-assessment check of how you're feeling emotionally right now. What's your emotional state? You might have never done that before, so I'm going to walk you through that step-by-step process if you struggle to do it. And also say maybe first start with why do I even need to do this? So the first thing I would say is, what are your patterns and what are your team's patterns? So if I'm looking at this from the perspective of a coach, of a mentor, of a leader, as a people who manages a group of individuals or a larger organization, what are my patterns and what are their patterns? So what do I mean by that is, if I know that my commute takes a little bit longer to get to work, and I'm end up late, and every time I'm late, I end up being annoyed, and I take that annoyance and that frustration into the workplace as the first 40 minutes of my time in the day, I need to know that, right? And my team probably wants to know that as well, so we're aware of it, right? If I know that one of my colleagues has someone who's potentially, let's say, they're ill, and they're ill quite often, and I know that their emotional state is struggling because of that, as in they're upset a lot of the time, I need to factor in that into the way that I converse and I interact and manage that person and coach that person. I need to understand it and where that's coming from. And then the last thing of where these 4-step processes would come from would be, can I recognize the triggers? So in the example I used, I was late for work due to my commute. That's a very simplistic reason, and hopefully not everybody gets too annoyed because they're late for work. But what are your triggers? There may be some really deep-seated root causes around that. What I would say is maybe just err on the side of caution. Some triggers for emotional reactions with individuals can be due to really deep-seated reasons that you probably need to talk to a therapist or other mental health professional around. So just be aware of how far you dig into that trigger response. And if you do find something you probably want to work on, please reach out to a care provider, a health provider to help you work through that problem. Something I've in the past and greatly benefited from him. So just a bit of a word of caution there. But why are we trying to recognize those triggers? We're trying to recognize them so we can preempt what's going to happen or prevent what's going to happen if that emotional trigger comes in out of the blue. So step one in this process, if you struggle to do it at the start, is notice, then identify and label the emotion. So notice, what am I feeling right now? So me personally, I'm feeling quite calm, quite relaxed, quite happy. Right. So I noticed that emotion. I've identified it as happiness or enjoyment, and then label that emotion. Why is that important? We'll get to that, right? So I'm going to say that I'm happy right now. Step two, I need to understand the source of that emotion. So where is that happiness coming from? So in my instance right now is I managed to speak to people I've never met on a topic that I greatly enjoy, doing a job that I like, in an environment I like working in, during a nice summer day in the UK. So there's plenty of reasons why that source of that emotion is coming from for me, right? And I'm using a very positive example here. We could maybe talk on a negative use case next. Step three, once we've understand what that emotion is that we're feeling and where it comes from. So maybe let's use the I'm annoyed because I'm late for work one as a maybe negative edge case. It's maybe better in this example. I'm late for work, so I'm annoyed. So the emotion is annoyance, frustration, anger. I understand the source of it. It's because I'm late for work, right? I'm feeling annoyed because I'm late for work. We're now at step three. The next two questions you need to ask yourself is, how is that emotion serving me and serving my team? Right. If I'm taking that aggression, that anger, that frustration, and I'm taking it out on my team, how is that serving my team? It isn't serving my team. So even though I'm feeling that emotion, I shouldn't express or emote that emotion to others, because there's going to be a negative impact. Same thing internally. That frustration, that anger isn't serving me right now. I can't control the traffic. I can't control why I was late for work for various reasons. I'm here now. Let's just get on with let's get on with my day. Let's understand and recognize that emotion and just put it to one side. The next question you want to maybe ask yourself is, how is it serving my relationship with myself and others? So slight variation to the previous question. This is more around you and your team. This is more, I guess, around your friends, families, and peers. How is it serving your relationship? So maybe your relationship with your spouse. They come home late from work. I don't know, I'm picking late for work. If my boss is watching this, I'm never late for work, FYI. I try not to be. Your spouse is coming home from work. He or she are late. They're really annoyed. How is it serving them, serving you? It probably isn't. Doesn't mean you don't feel that emotion. Doesn't mean you don't. It doesn't resonate with you. It's just how you respond, which takes us onto step four. And again, it links back to my Stoic practices, which is managing my response. So emotional awareness and self-awareness of your emotional state is not about suppression of an emotion. It's not about I should never feel angry, I should never feel upset, I should never feel sad. Should never feel. I'm not talking about negative emotions in this general regard. I don't want negative emotions. But although these negative emotions have general useful reasons for why we have them, it's not about suppressing them. It's just understanding that you're having them, understanding that where they're coming from, and whether it's a good idea to express that emotion with your communication interaction with other people. So about managing that response. So let's go back to my analogy of I'm late for work. And I want to take maybe a moment to just kind of recompose myself. I might say to my colleagues, I'm a little bit late, I'm behind. I just need 10, 15 minutes in the office alone just to kind of get back on track where I need to be for the rest of the day. I'm just going to use that 10, 15-minute breathing space by myself to get myself in a more regulated state, process that emotion, get through it, and re-tackle the day with a renewed focus and enjoyment. So again, we'll get to some more management techniques and how we can mitigate these responses later into the presentation. But that's what I mean by manage the response. It's manage how you act on that emotion. Okay, so some self-regulation techniques. So I highlighted one previous on how you could regulate your emotional state and how you're feeling. So maybe let's talk about the goals of self-regulation. So to kind of a broad recap, we talked about emotional intelligence in the context of other types of intelligence. We got to what the root core pillars of emotional intelligence is. We talked about how we can assess ourselves and others on what their emotional states may or may not be. And then the next thing is how we would regulate it. So even though this is self-regulation techniques, these techniques are obviously completely applicable to other individuals, and you can share these with others as well. I can go into these into great detail, but for the presentation, we're just going to kind of broadly touch on them. So there's some goals for self-regulation and why we want to do this. So this comes back to things like cognitive behavioral therapy and other medical practices that have evolved over time, so we understand where the emotional state of human beings come from and what that looks like. Emotions lead to actions or impact our actions. So the first thing is being able to disengage from the intensity of the emotion. So this is a really powerful one. So my son, he's non-verbally autistic. So what that means for him is his emotions are extremely overwhelming. One of the things he really struggles with is to self-regulate. So a simple way of putting that, his emotions are dialed up to 100. So where my sense of happiness might be a 70, his is 100. When he's sad, instead of being like a 25, it's an 80, right? So everything's dialed up an enormous amount. So the first goal of self-regulation is to be able to disengage from that intensity. Again, it's not about suppressing and not feeling it. It's about creating some distance between that emotion and yourself. So you're not in the emotion. So if you think about someone raging and someone angry, just aware that you're angry and just slow down and feel that, right? That's getting disengagement from that emotion. Next goal would be able to interrupt the cycle of rumination. That's a really long-winded way of dwelling on that emotion over and over and over again. So if we go back to my original example of I'm late for work, I choose to not implement any self-regulation techniques. I go into work annoyed, I go into work angry. I ruminate on that anger. I dwell in that anger, I sit in that anger, and it festers, it deepens, it increases. I start to think about other things that make me angry and other things that make me annoyed. By the time I get to the end of the day, I go home feeling incredibly annoyed, incredibly angry, and disappointed with how my day has gone. So breaking that cycle of rumination or cyclical thinking on that emotion is also one of the goals of what we're trying to do with this self-regulation. And then the next thing would be able to re-engage with the situation adaptively. What does that mean? So in a simplistic terms, is being able to understand that I am in an emotional state. I've had a reaction. I've done something from that perspective of emotion, although the emotion has changed how I might have acted. It's being able to flip that and move to something else. So in my example, going to the front door of the office, I just need 10 minutes if that's okay. I'm just behind 10 minutes alone. So I'm going to re-engage my perspective, re-engage my thought processes from that emotional action of I want to anger and shout and scream to let's go somewhere else quiet and calm and do something else, right? So re-engaging. So there's 5 techniques that I've listed here. Apologies, I'm going to take another drink. There's 5 techniques here. There's plenty of others, and again, I'm not a trained therapist or anything that nature. There's plenty more material on that. But these are 5 I've picked up and 5 that I've used. And other people I know have used to some degree. So one thing is reframing of negative thoughts. So this is difficult because my being late analogy maybe falls down here, but I'll try and make it work. So let's say reframe negative thoughts. My negative thought is I'm angry, I'm frustrated because I'm late for work. We could reframe that as I'm actually really passionate about doing a good job. Right? So I'm not angry because I'm late. I'm angry because it's preventing for me to go into work and do the thing I want to do. Right, so that anger is coming from a place of passion. It's coming from a place of actual love or a joy of the thing that you're doing. Right, so it's reframing that negative emotion into a more positive mindset. Acceptance and mindfulness. So again, this is an enormous thing within Stoic practices. Acceptance, right? I accept the fact that I'm angry. It's okay to be angry. You're totally entitled to the emotions that you're feeling, right? No one can tell you how to feel. Totally acceptable. That gives you the permission to feel the emotion, and it takes the power away from that emotion. Mindfulness is also linked to that. So being mindful of that I am in that emotional state, that I am angry right now. What does that mean? That means I need to do X, Y, and Z, right? That means I need to consider the way that I'm talking right now, or maybe take a moment. Which ties me into the next one. The way that I do this a lot is I also go for walks. This is a big one for me. Is go for a 10-15 minute walk. Most of the emotional states will go away within 10-15 minutes. Also because you're triggering your parasympathetic nervous system. You're triggering your non-flight and flight response. You're in your body. You're doing good stuff. Regulates you. It's great. Go for walks. I digress. So taking a break, right? So I'm in that emotional state. I'm in that frustration. I'm in that noise. What do I do now? I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to separate first from the situation, from the person, from the incident, and I'm going to compose my thoughts. If you've ever watched any television around things like the Apollo missions, anything like that, even when there was disasters, something horrendous had gone wrong, the first thing most of the engineers in the control room would do is they would take a pause. Right, let's stop, take a couple of minutes. What do we know? What don't we know? What we're trying to achieve? What's happened? What's the risks? What do we need to do next? Taking a break gives you that perspective that allows you to look upon yourself and separate yourself from that initial emotional response, that initial emotional trigger. Really, really important. The way that I do that, like I've said, is I tend to go for walks. Physical exercise, physical activity. Doesn't have to be a lot. Really powerful tool. Next is expressing your emotions constructively. So if we go back to my example of being late for work, is I'm late for work. I'm 30 minutes behind. How can I express that emotion constructively? Or can I, more, maybe a better way of putting this would be, how can I use that emotion constructively? Why don't I use some time now to look at my calendar and actually go, are these two calls necessary, or are they actually important for my time? Maybe I should be focused on this other task. Because I'm now a little bit late, it's allowed me to think about the task that I need to get on with and move it to something else, right? So constructively using that emotion or expressing it. And then the last one would be problem solving, which is, again, I think this is probably what I also default to the most, aside from taking walks, which would be problem solving, right? So work the problem. So if you go back to my very simplistic analogy of I'm late for work due to traffic, maybe I set off earlier. Maybe I take a different route to work. Maybe I work from home that day when I know the traffic's going to be bad, right? I work the problem that caused the emotional trigger. So the emotional trigger is less likely to come up. I'm going to tackle it that way. Okay, so hopefully that's a bit of a quick whistle-stop tour through self-regulation techniques. And again, these can be applied to not just yourself, but also your teams as well. Okay, we're going to expand now a little bit into empathy. So if you remember, I said earlier when I give you the 4 pillars, empathy was one of the pillars. And why is empathy so important? Because without empathy, you can't really have a deep connection with another person. It's very surface level. And as a coach, you do kind of need to really get to know the person that you're coaching. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to get them in the way you want to get them to. If you use a fitness coach as an example, if I want you to train in the gym for a reason, if I just shout and scream at you, you're just going to ignore me, right? I need to build some empathy and build why you're in that frame of mind to help get the best out of you. So, and empathy is also something you develop. So I refer to empathy as a muscle, something you can train, something you can learn to improve over time. How can we do that? So I've given 3 examples here, and I'll talk to 2 of them. So one is active versus passive listening. So we'll get to that one, but it's one of my personal favorites and something. If you're on a Teams call or a Zoom call with somebody, look out for this one. I'm gonna talk about. Next one would be mirroring or validation. I guess would be the one I will talk about, validation and building trust. So let's do active versus passive listening first. So how many times have you spoken to somebody? This question for yourself. How many times have you spoken to someone and got the impression they are really not listening to you? So let me use a really simplistic example as my body language. You're talking to me and I'm doing this and I'm looking around. Sorry, what? What was that? I didn't hear you. Sorry, what was that? They're distracted, they're not making eye contact, and they're not responding to your questions or responding to the thing that you're saying. Versus, yep, okay, I understand that. Sorry, could you go back? Could you explain to me what that principle was? Sorry, I didn't quite get that. Could you repeat that? Oh, thank you. That was great. Yeah, that was really good. So eye contact, asking questions, and nodding. Active listening versus passive listening. It makes the person think that you're actively engaged and you want to hear what they're saying. It's a really good way of building that empathy between you and the individual. The next thing would be mirroring, which I would call more like reflecting on the thoughts and feelings of others. So this can be a quite challenging one because you don't necessarily want to mirror every feeling that everyone's having. So if someone's illogically angry for some reason, you don't necessarily want to mirror that anger, right? But let's say that someone's come in because they've had a bereavement and they've finally come back to work after a period of time. They're really down and sad. Like, it's a perfectly valid response to mirror that behavior with, I'm really sorry that you're in that situation. I'm sorry that you feel that way. It's a way of building and understanding the empathy, that you empathize with that person's perspective and where they're feeling. And then the next thing would be validation, or acknowledging the other person's feelings. So I understand that you're really angry right now, but maybe we can work through it, and I understand where you're coming from. I totally get it. Yeah, I totally get it. So it's validating someone's response, validating someone's emotional state, and understanding that everyone's response is going to be slightly different. Something I maybe didn't express in the earlier slides, but the way that you express your emotions are uniquely to you, right? So no one can tell you how to think and feel. No one can tell you what emotion you should be feeling at any given one time. But what we can do with each other is we can communicate on how we want to articulate that emotional state between each other. I don't want you to scream and shout at me. Let's try and talk in a calm and controlled manner if we can. Okay, so let's build this up a little bit into now. As a coach, we understand where emotional intelligence comes from. We understand its core tenets. We've built in some self-regulation techniques so we can manage ourselves. We understand ourselves. We worked on our skills to create empathy with ourselves and others. So what do we do next? The next thing would be learning to be a storyteller, which is something our sales lead is very good at. And if you've got anyone who works in sales, listen to how they talk to clients and other people, the storytellers, and then building that connection with others. So this is kind of more to your social media, friends, social circle, working community. Why are these things important? Why are these social skills important? Great leaders, great coaches, great people naturally inspire people to want to do better for them, naturally inspire people to want to work for them, work with them, tackle the challenges of the day. And they all use the same principles. If you look back at history and you look back at literature, you look at medical research, importance of rapport, right? Understanding you and how your team works and how they communicate. If I know my team really enjoys it when we have a stand-up on the first day, and instead of having something serious, we spend 10 minutes just kind of doing a silly game. All right, and it builds a bit of rapport, a bit of banter, a bit of laughs. Really, really important. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone you work with has to be your best friend, but there's very few negatives into building a better relationship with the people that you work with, especially when you're spending so much time with them. Then teamwork, which is built through shared experiences and trust over time. So if I go back to my military experiences, why did some of our teams work so well together, especially in very high pressure situations? Because we'd been through the same terrible situations in the past ourselves. We're all coming from a shared perspective. We all wear the same uniform. We've all lived in the same accommodation. We've all worked in the same conditions. We've all done the same kind of things. So that shared experience, that I want to say brotherhood, but sisterhood as well, right? It is a very powerful tool to creating a team to work, right? Very important. And again, I'm using military examples, but there's plenty of tech examples you could think of. You've been through a big product release, really challenging, working weekends. You was monitoring production, all sorts of things, right? And then the next thing is I would try and get people to do you to do is learn to become a storyteller, right? Hopefully something I'm trying to do with this presentation is you take a subject that is potentially dry, not interesting, and learn how to tell a story, learn how to craft a narrative to portray information in an engaging, delightful way to get a deep message across. Right. I learned more about really deep topics because of how the story was told versus the information. If I just spent this next hour just talking in terms of pure medical studies and talked about stats and statistics and brain chemistry, you're gonna be bored, right? So learn to tell a story, learn to convey information around the empathy, not just the facts and the figures, not just the information underneath, and then learn how that becomes a building block to the way that you communicate. So you create a narrative. So if I'm going to use an example from a current client, we want them to make a decision on a particular project right now during the week. I could give them all the background information, all the results, all the technical literature, all the testing that we've done. Then on slide 15 of the presentation, I can give them the answer that they want. That's not really a story. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give them the answer at slide 1. This is the answer that you care about, and then the next 14 slides is how I got to that answer. That's telling them the story, the thing that you need to know, and here's how I got to that answer, versus all this information, then I give you the answer, right? It's how you tell that story, how you flip that narrative to help you convey that meaning and intensity and that empathy with others. Okay, some real world applications and case studies. I want to use a couple of examples that have not just been from myself, but also things I've experienced with other people that I've worked with and worked for. So maybe the first one I'll talk about is someone that I worked for, someone who was one of my direct commanding officers, also a bit of a mentor for everybody, I would say. So the example I take from the example I took from him in terms of his emotional intelligence and his coaching ability was when he came into the office during the day, and he said, "How are you doing? How are you getting on?" He just nodded politely. You often get a sense that sometimes when people do that, they're just paying lip service to that initial surface level contact. Like just, "Yeah, how you doing?" But I don't actually care how you're doing. I'm just being polite. Not only did it come across that he really did care, he actually knew a lot about you. So he would learn your spouse's name, your children, where you lived, who you grew up with, what your interests are, what kind of person you like, what things you enjoy, what you're passionate about. He didn't need to do that. He could have just told us what to do and we would have gone off and done it. But he didn't. He spent that time to build that rapport with us, right? Remember that previous slide? He built that rapport. He built that deep connection with people. And what did that give him in return, right? It gave him a huge amount of trust from everyone that worked for him. Everybody enjoyed working for him immensely. If he asked us to work a little bit harder because something happened, we did it without a question, without a second thought. We're happy to go the extra mile for you because you support us, you look after us, right? And not an enormously powerful tool set that he deployed. And looking back at it, it was such a subtle thing that he did, but really, really powerful and meaningful. It's something you can maybe take away and look at yourself. The next example I'll use is I'm going to use myself. Don't want to be big-headed, but I will try. So this would be around being a servant leader, right? So there's different types of leadership. Maybe if I come back to the GSDC and I do a different talk on leadership and management, I might give a talk on this one. But the different types of leadership that people use, most common, I think, in the business world that I see is transactional leadership. So I want you to do something because of this reason. So there's a transaction between me and you. Please go do the thing. You do the thing. I get the thing in return. Great. There's a transaction, right? There's a type of leadership. What I'm talking about is servant leadership. So something that is prescribed for people that want to be scrum masters. So we're flipping that to the IT industry. Scrum masters are taught to become servant leaders. What does a servant leader mean? It means the primary goal of your leadership is to serve and support your team. The team isn't a tool to give you an outcome. The team is a tool. The team is a group of people for you to serve. How would that service practically manifest itself? So if I take the example of myself, one of the things I'm really passionate about as a tester is helping my fellow testers and other IT professionals do the best they can with in the best way that they can, and just to help them out. So how can I do that? So I can do that by giving these kinds of talks and presentations. I can do it by writing about my industry and about things that I've struggled with and portrayed. I can do this by producing material and guidance and documentation and whatnot to help my team and help others within testing make their job easier, make their life easier, right? I'm serving my community as the best way that I can. So maybe just another example of those real world applications of within EA. So how did that tie into my emotional intelligence? Again, it shows my empathy and my care for others. I know how difficult testing can be. I have been a junior tester and went right through my career and understand how challenging it is. So when I see a junior, I'm mentoring somebody. If I mention a junior, I see how much of a challenge he's going through because of maybe challenging all conversations with clients. Like I understand where he's coming from, right? Or they're coming from. I understand. I've lived that experience. If you remember, I talked about storytelling element before, that rapport, I've lived in that same experience before. I've done that myself. This is what I did in that scenario. This is what I think you should do. You should maybe look at that, right? So it's super important example, and hopefully you'll take something away from that. And then if I can think of maybe one other example, as we've still got some time before we go into some questions, I think if I maybe talk, I've given one as someone leading me, someone managing me, and me leading and managing others. If I just maybe talk at like peer to peer, right? You're just your colleague, or just a friend. There's somebody that I work with, who I greatly respect. I respect all of my colleagues, if I'm honest, but I'm going to pick on one person. I'm not going to name them, but he very very consciously said to me, "Steve, you're doing too much right now. You're taking too much work on." He said that to me open and honestly in a conversation, because he could see that because I'm a servant leader type person, I want to do as much as I can for people. That the negative flip cause of that to me is overwork, stress, tiredness, burnout. Right? That's the flip side of being a servant leader to the extreme. He noticed that his emotional intelligence. He could see that that's the kind of person that I was like because of how I've interacted with him, and he just said to me, "You just need to chill out, drop some work, take it some time, have some leave, have a break," right? So that was peer to peer, no organizational structure, no management up or down, of just like, dude, you need to take a break right now. You're burning the candle too hard. I know you're trying to do your best for people, but you're gonna suffer on the other end. It showed a great amount of empathy for me and my state, despite me not complaining about how I was feeling. So validated my emotions before I even expressed them. Right, so high levels of emotional intelligence to even recognize that emotional state before someone expresses it or openly expresses it. There's maybe just three very simple use case examples from my own personal life between myself and people I've worked with. Or hopefully you can think of some other exampple in your own work colleagues and environments, especially around coaching and mentoring of your people. Okay, so I'm just going to take a drink. Okay, so action planning and some resource material. I did use other material for this presentation, some material that I've presented. So this is definitely not a definitive list of emotional intelligence and reading material to help you become a more emotionally attuned leader, manager, and coach. But these are the books that I've read and some of the tools that I'm aware of. I've used certainly two of them. One of them was highly recommended, so I don't have personal experience with it. And I can share links to these if needed afterwards. So the first one is Drive, which is a book around how to understand what is the motivating reason why you do things. So if you remember from right at the beginning, I had a slide that said our emotions can drive or dictate the way that we act, right? If or indirectly influence, certainly. So understanding, so for me, I want to serve and help people. Where did that come from? Well, there's a reason deep down inside why that is something I want to do, right? In my emotional construct as a person, there's a drive behind that's pushing that way I act. So that's that drive, really good. The emotional intelligence and your success. So this is from the EduQ or the EQ. This is where I probably got most of the material from. So it's a really good summary of emotional intelligence, our understanding of it in terms of psychology and medicine, where we've got to in terms of understanding even the regions of the brain where emotional intelligence is responsible and where it comes from and how it's interlinked with other parts of how we think. Really, really good. And then the last one is from Simon Sinek, who you may have heard of. Is a very famous talker and author. Talks all things leadership and has worked with some of the highest functioning teams in the world. And start with the why, which I talked a little bit about in my presentation. I'll give you the answer, and then we'll talk about how we got to it. Right. So a good example I've got from him, which was a TED talk that he did, which was the highest performing team that he ever analysed was the Navy SEALs. And he said the thing that they look for is two factors. They look for performance and they look for how trustworthy they are. Two things. But they said they would rather have somebody who has low performance and is highly trustworthy than someone who's high performing and not trustworthy. Interesting, right? So I'd rather have someone I trust and I can work with and I understand what they're like as a human being than someone who's a non-emotional psychopath, for want of a better description, right? Or can't be trusted with their emotional states. Very interesting. I haven't brought the link into the TED Talk, but I should have done maybe because it's a very good one. And then there's three tools there. There's the emotional capital report, the quotient inventory, which is you can kind of get some scores on your own EQ values using different tools and questions. And then there's the emotional intelligence test, or the MSCIT. Not one I've used before, but it came highly recommended when I did a bit of research on it. So these are maybe tools that you can utilize just to understand your own emotional constructs and how your kind of emotional state sits around, what your emotional intelligence like how emotionally intelligent you think you are. Some people think they're highly empathetic and highly attuned with emotional intelligence. They get tested naturally very low, right? So interesting, maybe one to take on to afterwards. That comes to the end of the presentation. Hopefully, I've run to time. I think we're close to an hour. I've left some links there, and again, GSDC will hopefully provide these for their social media as well. But if you want to get in touch with me in the future, there's my inspired email address there. There's our actual website that you can go to if you're looking at our careers and how our company works and the kind of stuff that we do. We're a pure software testing company based out of UK and South Africa, but we are international. There's our own YouTube channel, which I do feature in our podcast series, and obviously my LinkedIn profile.
Thank you so much, Sifan, for sending the recording in advance, and we are wishing you a speedy recovery and looking forward to having you in the future as live. So, participant, I am sharing Stephen's LinkedIn ID so that you can connect with him directly. Else, if you have any question, please feel free to use the chat box. We'll be taking this question to our speaker, and all of the questions will be answered into our LinkedIn post and social media blog. And moving ahead for wrapping the session, just allow me a minute to share my screen. So if you guys are ready to get certified into the learning and development, now the certifications are available into our website. We are also giving a complimentary coupon code to all of our participants, which will give you a 20% off for you obtaining this certification. So, but this offer is for a very limited time of period. So make sure you're taking the advantage of it. So if you want to get certified into the learning and development, check out our website, use the coupon code link, get 20% off and get certified. Before wrapping up the session, I just wanted to make a quick announcement regarding the utility tool. So if you're on your job hunting journey, this tool is for you. You can log in into utility tool by using your LinkedIn ID and password, and it will give you a recommendation according to the job designation you're targeting and the industry you're targeting. It will re-improvise your LinkedIn profile and make out a resume stand out your resume in front of the HRs and recruiters. We are also giving a complimentary coupon code to all of our participants, which will give you 100% off for using this tool. I have shared the coupon code link for certification as well as for the utility tool into the chat box so that you don't miss out. But this offer is for a very limited time of period. Make sure you're taking the advantage of it. Take the help of utility tool and stand out your resume in front of the HRs and recruiters. And also all the best to all of the job hunters out there. So, as I told you in the last week of session on Friday, that we are planning a panel discussion. So, from 4th, 5th, and 6th March, there will be no learning and development session. Instead of that, there will be a panels discussion. 4th March, we are going to have Maya Mishra, Cassandra, Krishni, and Livia as panelist and moderator. 5th March, we are going to have Sarah, Nicole, and Irina as panelist and Dharmaraj as moderator. And 6th March, we are going to have Ritu, Nidhi, Yukta as panelist and Asang as moderator. And this panel discussion is going to be so fruitful because we have decided to cover all of the industries over here: AI, L&D, and ISO. So I'm hoping to see you all into that discussion. The registration are open onto our website. Please check out our website to get registered. And if you're one of the person who is enthusiastic regarding ISO, then this webinar is for you. This is going to be conducted from 2nd to 6th March at 8:30 a.m. Central, 10:30 p.m. Singapore, 8 p.m. Indian, and 9:30 a.m. Eastern. I apologize for not informing you regarding the timing of women's panel discussion. So, women's panel discussion is going to be at 9:30 a.m. Central, 11:30 p.m. Singapore, 9 p.m. Indian, and 10:30 a.m. Eastern. And if you are one of those people who are enthusiastic regarding AI, especially Microsoft, GitHub, and Copilot Studio, then this webinar is for you. Our panel is giving hands-on demo experience explanation on these tools, which is going to be conducted from 2nd to 6th March at 7:30 a.m. Central, 9:30 p.m. Singapore, 7 p.m. Indian, and 8:30 a.m. Eastern. So if you want to learn regarding the AI, please join for this webinar. With that, it's time to celebrate our referral champions. We have Bhanu Durgesh, we have Oluwaga, and we have B. Venkatesh. So, special thanks to all three of you for helping us simplify our initiative and reach it to the wider global audience. So, you can also become one of our knowledge professionals and advisors. What do you have to do? If any of your peers, colleagues, and professional wants to join for this webinar or any other webinar, you can refer the registration link. What's in it for you? You will get a referral for your every reference. And once you hit a 50 referral point, you will be able to get a free $400 worth gift certification voucher. But this offer is also for a very limited time of period. So what are you waiting for? Take the advantage of this offer and become one of our knowledge professionals and advisors. Also, if you would like to be speaker for our learning capsules, webinar and podcast for this webinar or any other webinar, please reach out to us at the pratibha@gsdccouncil.org and pritham@gsdccouncil.org. I've shared the email ID into the chat box so that you don't miss out. We would love to have you as one of our speakers. And these are the platforms where you guys can connect with it. Our LinkedIn platform, our website, our WhatsApp group, our official WhatsApp channel, our Instagram channel, our Twitter channel, our YouTube channel. Also, we would love to hear your session key takeaways and learning outcomes. So I'm sharing all of the platforms link and the reviews.io link into the chat box so that you don't miss out. Please do connect with all of the platforms for staying updated regarding our upcoming events and trends, and do share your session key takeaways and learning outcomes on reviews.io. With that, it's time to come to an event end. So, on the occasion of Holi, because we have a global audience and India is also one of our audience part, so on the occasion of Holi, there will be no any session, but from the 4th March, we are going to have the panel discussion 4th March, 5th March, and 6th March. So I'm hoping to see you all there as well. Till then, keep learning, keep energizing. Also, a very special thank you to our speaker, Stephen, once again for sending a recording, and it was a very wonderful, impactful session. I'm sure all the participants have learned a lot. Looking forward to having in the future session as well. And all the happy Holi in advance to our Indian audience, and we'll see you on the 4th March. Have a good day, good night, good evening, good morning, wherever you are.